Hello, welcome to part 3 of Coding for Kids in Scratch. Today, we'll be going over Chapter 10, which is all about visuals. So, without further ado, let's get started. Now that we've covered most of the coding aspects of Scratch, we're going to get into the visual aspects to create more polished games or projects. Well-implemented visuals can really help a project feel complete. So, the first part of visuals that we're going to cover is how to use every aspect of sprites. As you already know, sprites are the characters that are used in Scratch. Most code is executed through sprites, and they play one of, if not the most important roles in Scratch projects. So, the first thing we're going to do in this chapter is explore everything that can be done with sprites. So to start, let's create a new project by going to the home page and clicking Create. And then, once the project loads up in the editor, let's rename it Visuals, so we can always come back and reference it later. So all of the sprites that are used in this project can be managed from this little box in the bottom right that is underneath the stage. So at the very bottom right, you're going to see a pretty blank area, and this is where all the sprites will be housed. And here there's going to be a small version of each sprite displayed with its default name or whatever name you've given it underneath. This name can be changed by going to this information area that lies between the sprite box and the stage, and then clicking next to where it says sprite and where the default name shows up, and you can just type in a new name. So I can type in cat, and you'll see that I'll rename this sprite cat, and you'll see that change in the little area with the sprites as well. And then in the bottom right of this little box here is a button that allows you to add new sprites, and we glanced over this before, but we're going to go into a little more depth now. So let's hover over the button, and you'll see that more options for adding sprites should appear. So let's go through each option, starting from the main button and moving outwards. So clicking on the main button or the magnifying glass above it will bring up a collection of all the sprites provided by Scratch that looks something like this. And hovering over certain sprites, like this one or maybe even this one, will make it look like there's an animation of the sprite playing. And this is especially common among sprites with walking in the name. And we're going to go over this animation soon, but for now, let's click where it says back in the top left corner. Then let's hover over the Add Sprite button again, and the next option that we're going to go over is this little paintbrush. And this will let you create a sprite of your own in Scratch. So it has quite a few options and can be a great tool for those who are more artistically inclined or want to add a little more of a personal touch to their project. So if we click it, you'll see that this is what the editor looks like for creating sprites in Scratch. So let's go back to the code area by clicking the code tab in the top left next to where it says costumes, and it should bring you back to the code area, and you'll actually see that it made a brand new sprite as well. So we're going to just want to delete that by clicking this little trash can that appears to the top right of the image that is in this little area. And you'll see that that just disappears, and then it brings you back to the code for the cat, which is evidenced by the little translucent cat in the top right. So let's hover over the button once more, and then you'll see that this spark above the paintbrush will basically let you choose a completely random sprite from the Scratch collection. And then the last option, the upload button, will let you choose an image from your computer to use as a new sprite. But now, let's go over the animation from before. This animation is actually showing you all of the costumes for a sprite. And a costume is essentially the same sprite, but drawn slightly differently. And using these costumes can add an extra touch that will make your project stand out. And part of this comes from adding animations of your own within the game, or within the project. So to illustrate this, we're going to improve on our game program from last chapter. So if you don't want to make changes to that project, you can copy the code from that last chapter. So just make sure that the code is being added in the code area for the cat sprite. And in case you forgot, this is what the code looked like. I'll assemble it here quickly. So for the purpose of this project, we're only going to be using the move right and move left blocks. So I'll actually just delete the definition for move up, move down, and jump, because we aren't going to be working with those ones in this chapter. So we'll just work on the move right and the move left blocks. So before we get into costumes, if you want to see what costumes are available for a sprite that you're using right now, you can go to the costumes tab, which is on the left hand side, which is to the right of the code tab. And then you'll see that it brings up the costume, and it brings up this editor again, but it's a little bigger, and you can see the sprite in all of its details. So you'll see that there's actually two costumes for this cat, and there's the one that we've been using so far, and then there's the second one that makes it look like the cat is running. So if you're using a sprite that doesn't have more costumes, you can actually create some more of your own using the button in the bottom left. And this button has all the same options as the button for adding sprites that we already covered. But for now, let's go back to the code tab so we can work on implementing costumes into our categories. So to use different costumes, you have to use a block in the looks category. So let's go to that category, and then we're going to find the one called switch costume to costume to block. And then let's look at the definition for the move right block that we had defined in the last chapter. And now we're going to drag a switch costume inside of the if then block, right above the change x by 10. Alright, and then we're going to drag another one of those blocks, the switch costume blocks, between the change x by 10 and the wait blocks. Now, let's change the costume in this second block from costume 2 to costume 1. So this way it'll switch to looking like it's running, then it'll move, and then after it looks like it's done moving, it'll switch back to the normal costume, right? So then your code should look like this. And then let's quickly run the program. And if you press the right arrow, you should see that there's actually no differences. The cat just looks like it looked before. It's just moving across the screen. And this is because the code is going to run too quickly for us to see that costume change. So let's stop the program, and then let's fix this. So to fix this, let's go to the control category, and let's drag a wait 1 second block underneath the first switch costume block above the change x by 10 block so that your code looks like this. So you can experiment later to figure out what looks best for your program, but for now let's just change the time from 1 to something like 0.01, so just a small number. So then your code should look like this with the definition, then the forever block, then the if key right arrow pressed, then inside of that block you have switch costume, then wait 0.01 seconds, then change x by 10, and then switch back to the other costume, and then wait 0.05 seconds. Now let's press play this time. And when you press play, you should see, when you press the right arrow, you should see that the cat now looks like it's running instead of gliding. So a similar thing can be done for the move left block with a little bit extra code being added to make it look like the cat is pointing to the left so that it looks more natural. So first off, let's just stop the program quickly, and then let's add the code that we need to make this left motion work as well. So first off, we're just going to go back to the looks category, and we're going to add those switch costumes blocks. So let's add the switch costume above the change x block, and then the switch costume above the wait block. Then let's go to the control category, and let's grab a wait 1 second block and put it between the first switch costume block and the change x block, and then let's change that time quickly to 0.01, and then change the second costume block to costume 1. However, if we run this right now, it still won't face the other direction. So to do that, we have to use two blocks that we are familiar with from the motion section. So we're going to look for the set rotation style left-right block and drag that one above the switch costume block. And then we're going to look for the point in direction 90 block. And then we're going to click and drag that one underneath the set rotation style block and above the first switch costume block. Then the first thing we need to do is just make sure that we switch this to point in direction -90 instead of +90. And then because we have now just made it point in the left direction, anytime we click left, it's not going to move to the right and point to the right when we click the move right block. So let's just quickly add a block so that it does that. So let's grab a point in direction 90 and drag it above the first switch costume block. And now your code should look something like this, with a little more code for each one with the point in direction block so that each block is facing in the correct direction. So now that let's run the program, and you can see that now it looks like the cat is running in both directions instead of just gliding across the screen awkwardly. So let's just stop the program, and I would recommend that you just go through and see what else you can do with different sprites and their costumes, but this chapter will cover everything you need to know to start implementing them into projects of your own. So then next we're going to go over backgrounds so that we can finally tie every part of our program together and make our code into cohesive and complete projects. So backgrounds are the other main aspects of visuals, and they're basically just an image that replaces that white area in the stage. And the process of implementing backgrounds is very similar to using sprites, so this should be pretty simple. So similar to these sprites, the backgrounds can be managed from under the stage, and there's a little column to the right of the box for managing sprites, and that's the box for managing backgrounds. And it's a lot smaller because it only shows the background images that you've saved just a little bit smaller. So by default, the background is white. However, we can add new backgrounds to the project using this button at the bottom right of the screen. And this button operates very similarly to the ones for adding sprites. So I'm just going to go over these quickly. Clicking the main button or the magnifying glass is going to bring up any of the Scratch provided backgrounds. Then the paintbrush will let you create your own background. Then the spark will add a random background from the Scratch collection. Then the upload button will let you choose an image from your computer as the background. For now, let's add a new background to the project either by choosing one from the Scratch collection or by getting a random one using the spark option. It doesn't matter what background you choose for this part of the book. So then, the background should automatically appear as the backdrop of the stage. So then, just like the sprites, you can actually include code that's specific to that stage. So click on the backgrounds column and where the new backgrounds is displayed, and it should bring up a new code area. And just like with the sprites, you should see that there's a little translucent image of the background now in the top right of the code area. So this section of code is very similar, but it should be a little bit different as well. The motion block has no code blocks, and the looks category only has a few. But other than that, you'll see that the rest of the code seems to be pretty much the same as it was with the sprites. So here you can actually write code for the backdrops, and it allows you just to have another space for writing code, and it helps you bridge those gaps between the codes of different sprites. So similar to the Costumes tab above the code storage, there's a new Backgrounds tab when you click on this part of the code. So this tab will let you view all the backgrounds and in the project, and you can even edit them yourself as well. And backgrounds are pretty simple, if you can see just by this. So if we go back to the code area, and then we can just click the cat so we can bring up the code from before. And you should see that backgrounds are just really an easy way to improve the overall look of your project. Now this cat isn't just moving around in a blank space. Maybe look, it's moving around on a street, or maybe for you it's moving in a forest or something like that. It just adds a little something extra that makes the project a little more fun. And when used in conjunction with sprites and their costumes, they can greatly enhance the visuals of a Scratch project, making it more distinct and more fun to interact with. So for now, let's move on to the next chapter, where we're going to finish up the third part of this book with a lesson on the open source nature of Scratch programs.